Okay, it's 8 o'clock. We're going to get started. I know we all have busy schedules. And a little bit of, however, good news, I'll start with this in the sense of our schedules, that we really have no rules right now. And I think the deadline for the March 16th meeting will be next, maybe 22nd. So it's possible we may go a month before we meet again. So just keep that on, keep checking your email, stuff like that. And Senator Lyons saying darn over here, but we all are busy in our committees. So, but that's the nature of the situation. And of course, after that, we'll get 20 rules, right? So
for the week of adjournment.
Yeah.
Anyway,
The other way.
so it looks like we might be another month before we get back together. Okay. All right. Good morning, all. Welcome to the Lcar meeting for Thursday, February 16th. And before we get started with our agenda, I'd like to go around the room and do introductions, and I'll start with my legislative counsel.
Anthea Dexter Cooper from the Office of Legislative Counsel.
Carol Odie from State Representative from Burlington.
Ginny Lyons, Senator representing Chittenden Southeast.
Mark Higley, representative from Lowell, representing the Orleans-Lamoille District.
Good morning, Dave Weeks, Senator representing Rutland County.
Representative Seth Bongartz, I represent the towns of Arlington, Manchester, Sandgate, and part of Sunderland.
Good morning, Chris Bray from Bristol, representing the Addison Senate District.
And Representative Trevor Squirrel, representing Underhill and Jericho, and
Darlene Bindo, Community Assistant. And Lindsay Schreier, Administration Assistant.
and introduce yourself.
Mark McDonald, Orange County. Thank you.
All right. First item on the agenda are the minutes from February 2nd, 2023. Any discussion? Senator Bray.
I move that we approve the minutes of.
Second.
Thank you. The second.
Okay. Any more discussion? Okay. All those in favor of the motion to approve the minutes from February 2nd, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay, the first rule we have here is, I'm not seeing it here, I'm just listed. It's 22P22, Agency of Education Rules Governing the Licensing of Educators and the Preparation of Education Professionals. And we have Ronald and Josh and Amy, but I don't know who's going to take the lead here.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Perfect. My name is Ron Ryan, and I'm the program manager for the licensing division, and I'll begin and take the lead with this. We've had some recent turnover where our director left, so I'm filling in to help with some aspects, and we were able to hire an interim director, and he's with us today, Josh Sulier. And we have Amy Scalabrini, who was our Vermont Standards Board Professional Educator Liaison, and Amy should be joining us as well. So our job is to look at the relicensing of educators and update and make changes from year to year, depending on what the situations come up within our licensing board. And the information that was provided you, there's kind of 4 areas. I'll just kind of summarize them for you. There's tweaks here and there on individual words, as you know. Another aspect is the English language learner endorsement, which has always been titled the English language learner, has been modified and changed to the title of multilingual learner endorsement, because that is the title that is being used nationwide instead of English language learner. So that has been changed. We've also added some options for driver's education this year. In the past, driver's ed, you have had to have a license to be able to teach in-class driver's ed and in vehicle. And we've had a lot of districts tell us that they've struggled to find driver's ed teachers, and they could just get somebody to be in the classroom, and in other aspects, they can only get somebody to drive in the vehicle. So we've been able to modify that rule and to allow a driver's ed educator in vehicle only or in classroom only. So if they're able to find a driver's ed person that could just be the teacher aspect of it, they're now allowed to do that. And if they can just find somebody that wants to just drive, that option is there as well. And then the fourth section is updating testing requirements for Praxis Core, which is kind of the initial testing for reading, math, and language, that area, and writing. And in the past, there's been some struggles with testing. As you know, from time to time, people struggle with a test, and because they can't pass the test, that puts some obstacles up. So we've been able to look at that and make some adjustments for the Praxis Core, which means there are some other options other than testing. So if they fail a test, there are some other avenues that they could use. For example, they might be able to, if it was a math part of that test that they failed, they could use transcripts and go back and prove to us that they've taken a particular course in math, and that would cover those competencies for that area. And with the support of the higher ed and the licensing office, those individuals then can move forward and not have to take the Praxis test in that area, but be able to be waived because they've been able to provide an alternative source for us. So that is kind of in a nutshell the four areas. There was also a correction that we made with your legislative council in one of the sections, which was 5247.4. There was a line in that section that shouldn't have been there. It should have been in 5247.6. And we've presented that information to the legislative council, and I believe they passed that on to you. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions? Any discussion? Representative Higley.
Yes, Mr. Chair, is this for discussion on the whole rule here or just on?
No, it can be on what's been submitted to us.
Okay. I do have a couple of questions, Mr. Ryan. I noticed that I believe there was just one public hearing, but I didn't see anything in the packet in regards to the number of folks that gave some public testimony or what that testimony was.
Yes, Amy Scalabrini did report that to your legislative council. We did have a public comment section, but nobody showed up for that. So there was no public comment.
Okay, and then my other question, I guess, is it's on the new multilingual learner section. And I'm assuming, I don't know if this is new or if it's been there all along, but it's my understanding it's on the licensing endorsement, but I can just read to you what my concern is, or if somebody can explain it to me. It's actually on page 125. It's 2.5, and it seems to be teachers demonstrating certain knowledge, applying knowledge, so on. But in 2.5, it says, teachers identify and describe the impact of their identity, role, culture, understanding, personal biases, critical knowledge of U.S. culture, and hidden curriculum bias on their interpretation of the education strengths and needs of an individual students and multilingual learners in general. I guess I don't have a complete understanding of what that teacher is identifying all that stuff for. And again, has it been in there all along, or is that new under the multilingual learner provisions?
That has been in there. When these endorsements are revised, what they do is they bring in again, teachers that have a background in English learner, and in this case, the multilingual learner. So they would bring in a number of those teachers along with agency of ed personnel and others to sit down and go over all of those competencies and those standards. So I believe as they went through there, some of those sections stayed in, and this was one of those sections that stayed in. I can't give you any of the details because I wasn't on that committee, but they supported that section.
Okay, well, thank you for that information. I'm glad to know. I guess it's been in there. A little confusing to me as to what a teacher's answers would be to all that. But anyway, thank you.
Senator?
Just a question on Praxis. Was wondering if you had any feedback, positive or negative, from the NEA, the Association of Superintendents, the School Board Association?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's been an ongoing issue, meaning it's come up multiple times, and in this past year, we really wanted to address it. And some of the reasons why we needed to address it is there were many teachers coming into Vermont, and because they couldn't pass the Praxis, they exited Vermont and they didn't follow through in the teaching profession. And, they may have missed a Praxis core by 1 or 2 points, percentage points. And because of that area, and because of that miss, we lost some good people. And so, the NEA has been supportive of other alternatives along with the agency and the Vermont Standards Board. So I think it's been a positive aspect. What I will say to the committee is Praxis Core is the first step of the test that initially an applicant has to take. There's also the Praxis 2 content test that they have to pass. So if it's a math teacher, for example, they have to pass the Praxis Core, which is the writing, reading, and math section, basics section, but then they actually have to pass the Praxis 2 in their content area. And there's also have been a lot of concerns about that particular test. And the board is actually looking at other alternatives for the Praxis 2. So, we very well may be back next year with some changes in that rule. Again, trying to provide some other alternatives than only one, because as we all know, test taking isn't the answer for everything. And, somebody again may miss that test by 1 or 2 points, and they could be, the best teacher in the world. And because of that, they lead the profession.
Right.
So
that's if I could, Mr. Ryan, did specifically NEA or the other 2 associations formally endorse or formally reject the notion?
No, I don't know if Patrick had received anything in writing. I don't believe we've received anything in writing other than comments that have been made in the past.
Okay.
That have been positive.
Okay. Any additional discussion? Questions? Okay.
I think the praxis question is a big one that possibly, are you going to, through rules, be addressing praxis in the future?
Yes, this is on our docket actually for the Vermont Standards Board for Professional Educators. They've asked us to look at options for the Praxis 2. And so I anticipate next year you'll probably see a rule change on that.
Thank you.
Do any of you other folks that are on want to offer any additional comments? Are we all set? Okay. Senator Bray.
Hearing no further discussion, I move that we approve Rule 22P22, rules governing the licensing of educator and the preparation of education professionals, with the following modifications proposed by the Agency of Education. 1, deleting will allow the educator to seek licensure without meeting practice core requirements from the end of section 5247.4, and 2, renumbering the second section 5247.4 to be section 5247.6.
Okay, you've heard the motion from Senator Bray. Any additional discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Okay, the next rule up is 23E01, it's emergency rule, Department of Health rules governing medication-assisted treatment for opiate use. And speaking for the department, I believe is Brendan Atwood.
Yes, good morning. How are you all doing?
Please proceed. Good morning.
Thanks very much. So for the record, my name is Brendan Atwood. I am a policy advisor with the Health Department. With this filing, the department is proposing to amend the rules governing medication-assisted treatment for opioid use disorder. This rule has two parts. The first is that it establishes the requirements for office-based opioid treatment providers to prescribe buprenorphine to individuals accessing treatment for opioid use disorder. Additionally, this rule establishes the requirements for opioid treatment providers that are specific to Vermont. And so in December of last year, 2022, Congress removed the federal requirement that medical practitioners first obtain a waiver in order to prescribe buprenorphine to individuals accessing treatment for OUD. This rulemaking similarly removes that provision from state law and allows medical practitioners to prescribe buprenorphine so long as they have the appropriate DEA authorization. Without this rulemaking, providers would still be required to obtain a waiver that is at this point no longer obtainable. The department worked with the Vermont Medical Society as well as DEVA in this rulemaking, and we anticipate starting the regular rulemaking process shortly to make this change permanent. So that's a quick overview. I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I don't have a question. I do have a comment. I did send in my little approval sheet.
Okay. Yeah, I hadn't seen that, but thank you.
Yeah. Did you get it?
I don't think I did.
I sent it by page.
Nope.
Uh-oh.
Well, we know now.
Right.
Okay, any questions for Brendan? Okay. Senator Bray.
Hearing no further discussion, I move that we move approval of Rule 2301, Agency of Human Services, rule governing medication-assisted treatment for opioid use disorder.
Okay, we have a motion from Senator Bray regarding Rule 23E01. Any additional discussion? Seeing none or hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That's a quick one. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Okay, we have a couple of logistical committee things here, and I'll turn it over to our council.
Sure, sounds good. So you have two sort of related things. This stems from a discussion that you had at the very end of your meeting, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, about the timing on when you were receiving materials in advance of your meetings. And for as long as I've been involved in Lcar, and I think well prior to that, the in-session and out-of-session meeting schedule, this document here that's got the two columns, have had the rule submission deadline be the Tuesday, 2 weeks before the meeting. So like 16 days before you're scheduled to meet. This in-session meeting schedule that you are being asked to approve has shifted the rule submission deadline column by a week. So you're going to be getting the rules approximately, do math, 23 days before the scheduled meeting. What that shift does not do and cannot do, because this next part is in statute, is change the fact that Lcar only has a 45-day review period. So if Lcar wants to object, if you think about the timing, if you're getting the rule 23 days before the meeting, or it could be more than that, but if they submit it right before the filing deadline for the meeting, you do not get more than 2 meetings during session, because you would get your meeting on the 23rd day, your meeting on the 30th day. You might actually end up getting 3 meetings with it being the 44th day, but it could be that you end up having a tighter schedule in terms of if you want to push it to subsequent meetings. But you're getting the rule a week in advance, so hopefully some of the things that might cause you to want to postpone to a subsequent meeting will get resolved earlier in the process. So that's what you're seeing in the top portion of the chart. The other change that you're seeing is in the explanatory paragraph about witness and document submission policy. Under Lcar's procedural rules, and this is the next item on your agenda, it has always said that documents need to be filed at least 48 hours in advance, and requests to be on the agenda have needed to be at least 2 business days in advance. So that has worked out in practice to being 8 a.m. on Tuesday morning would be when you would probably be needing to get requests under that 48 hours. And 2 business days, it doesn't really specify, like, is it a full business day? Is it any point on the 2 business days prior? So the proposal that you see in the rules is to change both of those to by 4:30 p.m., 3 days in advance, which if you meet on Thursday will be Monday at 4:30 p.m., which is what's reflected in this paragraph. Your chair has pointed out, which is an excellent point, that if Lcar ever shifts its meetings to earlier in the week, if it's business days, then that gets you part of the prior week, whereas if it's just days, people would be submitting things over the weekend. Charlene's not going to see it until Monday, and then if the meeting is on, Monday, they maybe hit their 3-day requirement, but you got very little notice and very little time with the materials if it's not sent to you immediately. So I think the recommendation from Representative Squirrel would be to insert business days before the days in the changes in the rules. Wouldn't change this paragraph at all, because this schedule is assuming that you're continuing to meet on Thursdays. So you have 2 things to talk about, 2 things to approve. The top portion, the 3 weeks before for your submission deadline, and then this paragraph in conjunction with the proposed changes to the rules requiring submissions and requests to be on the agenda by, if you continue meeting on Thursdays, 4:30 p.m. on Monday, or if you don't meet on Thursdays, 4:30 p.m., 3 business days prior. So I feel like that was a lot of information. Happy to answer questions. Happy to do it slower. I know that time is very, very precious on a Thursday morning.
So I'm looking at page 3 of the proposed rule change. And so Representative Squirrel, are you suggesting to leave in the business days and or
Yes.
how we do it? Okay.
So it would say by 4:30 p.m., 3 business days in advance of the meeting. And then on page
On 2 and 3, right?
yes, on page 2. Yeah, it would be in section 3A, it would say by 4:30 p.m., 3 business days in advance.
The other changes here are just the changes in names of committees.
Exactly.
Sound great.
I think this will be helpful. One thing I'm wondering about is when we have an end of day deadline and then staff has left for the day, it's less useful than if it's like noon, for instance, and then someone receives it and can distribute it. So I'm just wondering about pushing it to a noon deadline, because that means we might get the materials that day as opposed to they could sit for another day. So I'm just, if we're moving up a day, I'm just trying to think of how to make more of the fact that the deadline moved up.
So you're suggesting noon, replace the 4:30 with noon, 3
Yeah.
business days
Yeah.
in advance. That doesn't matter to me, but it works for me.
I'll make Charlene happy.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be getting everything at 4:30 when I'm trying to leave at 4:30.
That's a good point. Everyone okay with that change? Okay. Any other comments or discussion? Senator Lcar.
We should at least just think for a second about the moving the deadline for submission forward, and that issue of, like, the rules we just went through with the ag department, having those, that I'm the one who kind of started this in part because over the summer, I was getting packets like 2 days before I wasn't there, or 1 day before, and I just didn't have time to do the reading. And I really don't need 3 weeks. I need a week. So so I guess the question is, what are we really trying to accomplish here? Here's the question, are we going to regret not giving ourselves more time to be able to push something forward for a week or two if we need to? As we're having discussions with of course, we can ask for the extension. They give it to us. That's really not an issue. So maybe I just talked myself back around to.
Yeah, it's been my experience that an agency or department is not denied our request for that. I think we tend to work together on those kinds of things. So I don't think it's a huge issue.
And maybe it's the mail. Maybe that's why I wasn't getting them.
Yeah, we all have different mail situations, I'm sure, when it's off session.
And I just want to point out, there are sort of 2 instances where you're receiving things. There's Charlene and the Secretary of State's office receiving something that then gets it onto your schedule. This would be changing the time from when Charlene first gets, like, via email, all of the materials that she then needs to, like, copy, print out, assemble, make the packets. You can see some of them are coming now that are being nicely bound. Like, that's where the 3 weeks will be. It's not changing the time between when you say in a meeting on week 1, hey, can you go talk to the Department of Health and get back to us? That receipt, that's going to be the one that's related, tied to now this noon on Monday. So you're still not getting a week there. You're getting 3-ish days there.
It's all fine. I think it's good. Yeah, and especially for that reason. Give time to get it together and out to us. So.
Any other discussion? So, Senator Bray.
Do we need a motion to approve those changes?
I believe we do. And there are 2 here. One is the actual schedule, and this sheet, if you will.
Yep.
The other one's the rule.
Yep. And you certainly need there's nothing that requires you to have a schedule that you publish, but under statute, you're allowed to adopt rules, and you should formally be moving and approving the rules that you're then putting out that people need to follow. You don't have to follow the rulemaking process.
No, I could. Okay, can they be bundled together?
I'd do them separately, just to make things easier.
Everything in moderation, including moderation. Okay. Move for approval of Lcar's revised 2023 in-session meeting schedule.
Any discussion? Okay, we have a motion from Senator Bray regarding the schedule. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
I'd like to offer a motion to adopt the potential revisions to the committee's procedural rules. That's it.
Another motion from Senator Bray to edit, modify the legislative committee on administrative rules.
And that includes the noon? Okay.
The business days.
Yes.
Yeah.
Noon and business days.
Okay.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. And is there another item?
Yeah, there's one more. So this is the start of what could be a long discussion, I don't know. But if you'll remember back to over the summer, you received some recommendations from the state auditor's office. And one of them was that there should be work done to track rulemaking. And that is something that Ledge Council will start doing this session. So in my email, there's this chart. You've seen this before. You signed off on this idea. I'm just refreshing your memory. The part on the top, that's what Ledge Council attorneys will fill out as part of the act summaries that we prepare. That chart will not be made part of the act summaries. It's just a tracking of information that we keep internally. And then we'll generate this database that we can make available to you, to the chairs of the standing committees, to council attorneys, and it will provide information on upcoming rulemaking. So tracking new rulemaking, tracking amended rulemaking, tracking if there's been a transfer of authority for rulemaking, you're shifting it from one administrative agency to another. So I think we are squared away on that first recommendation. The other two recommendations that you received from the auditor's office was first, whenever possible, when rulemaking is being required, so using that shall as opposed to may, one of the things that's being tracked in the chart, include a deadline for either the proposed rule to be filed or to be adopted. The very presence of a deadline appears to have the effect of increasing the likelihood that rules will be promulgated as envisioned. So I'm going to start at something I will always go back to, which is that's a policy decision. So you can say you need to adopt rules, but if you're going to put a deadline there, you need a lot of information. What are the consequences if they don't meet the deadline? Are you really going to, bring it up? Is someone going to sue? I know with the Global Warming Solutions Act and the Climate Action Plan and that December deadline, that was out there. There is a consequence if you don't adopt a rule. That was a policy decision that the General Assembly made. It had more teeth than just you shall do something by a particular date. Things to consider when a committee of jurisdiction is requiring rulemaking by a date. It takes a long time to write rules. It takes a long time to go through the adoption process. 8 months is the amount of time that they have from when they're filing it with the Secretary of State's office, and that's after they've already gone through the Lcar process, after they've already written the rules. So rulemaking is not quick. And the longer something's going to take, the harder it is to pinpoint a deadline that it needs to happen by. Sometimes there's going to need to be consultation with other entities, consultation with what a federal rule is, maybe waiting for another state to do something, like in the case of California and the suite of clean car rules. So I think frequently there are going to be things that committees of jurisdiction don't necessarily know when they're requiring rulemaking. So I guess a question for all of you is, much like you sent a memo to the chairs of the committees of jurisdiction reminding them of that part of statute that says you're supposed to be providing us information with legislative intent, is there anything that you think it would be beneficial to convey to the chairs of standing committees with regard to thought process, things to consider around shall used in rulemaking requirements linked to some sort of date, schedule, timing? And then the second piece of the remaining recommendations from the auditor's office is also going to be, I think, a policy decision, and that's requiring a reporting back when you're requiring rulemaking. So do you want interim updates? Do you want them to be oral? Do you want them to be in writing? Do you want to see advanced copies of the rules? Do you want to have contemporaneous filings when they're going to Lcar for the first time? All sorts of different considerations. And then the related question is, what, if anything, do you think Lcar should be conveying to the chairs of standing committees with respect to that recommendation? And you could choose to convey nothing, or just put it on the agenda as a discussion point.
There's a lot there.
Yes. A lot to think about, a lot to discuss, maybe not something you can sort out in one meeting.
Has Legislative Council had this discussion? I mean, at some of your staff meetings?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've talked about this with Jen Carby and Mike O'Grady, in agreement on the fact that there's a lot of policy decisions behind this. We certainly could, if there was a request to have a more consistent approach, work that into how we draft things. But anytime you're going to sort of say draft things XYZ way, you're taking away some of the inherent flexibility of addressing a situation in a particular way. And I know there have been sort of a lot of questions around with some of the rules that have been required as to should there be more process than is in the APA, and that in itself is going to create policy decisions along the way.
Senator Bright.
So I'm glad we're talking about it. I don't know how, it feels a little I'm a little uncomfortable sort of talking that we're going to send a recommendation to chairs, but I suppose if it's just a recommendation. But I think it really is, it's good governance practice to initiate rulemaking by date certain and ask for something by date certain after you've consulted carefully with the agency and departments that you're working with. Because one, it just helps, I don't know if launching any big project that you wouldn't put a timeline on and try to figure it out. And the whole process of working on the timeline is often been, from my experience, very helpful in terms of the agency educates you about what's going to happen and what the complexities are, and then you end up building a realistic schedule. The other thing that goes along with it to me is that it's the moment at which you can say, well, do you have adequate resources to carry this out? And then you can have realistic expectations. I hate the idea that we ever pile things on to agencies and departments that are already fully busy. So all which is to say, I think recommendations around dates and timelines developed in consultation with the operating areas would be a healthy practice just from sort of like a project management point of view.
Yes, Senator Wentz.
Well, at this point, I can't make any firm decisions about what's the right recommendation around dates and so on, but it would seem to me having a letter sent out to all the chairs and to the leadership, and there should perhaps be a conversation amongst the chairs of committees, both in the House and the Senate, just to understand what the issues are and what you've identified as problematic, or what the auditor has identified as. Excuse me. I didn't mean to assert that. Okay, so, yeah, so I mean, it's just like, just so that there's an awareness. I think that's the first step, and allow for that dialogue to take place. And I don't know that we can tell committee chairs that you can't put a date certain in, but certainly you can suggest that there are consequences to putting that date certain in without taking some steps, such as talking with various folks in different agencies or departments. So I think a little guidance from us might be helpful. And then I would be happy to talk about it another time as well. I think this is just the first go around.
Well, to follow on your comments, Senator Lyons, I think, yes, we should have enough of a conversation probably at the next meeting. I might even suggest that the idea of guidance, I think, is what we're looking at here.
Yeah.
Maybe you can start to work on a document that speaks to that guidance. I don't know what it should look like necessarily, but it's a starting place for us to have a conversation. And I think the other part of that is that however we decide to maybe approach, whether it's the chairs meeting or those kinds of whatever that might be for each body, right? I think the other part will be all our lawyers are on the same page regarding this issue and educated about it, and they can help with that guidance with the chairs. That's kind of what I'm thinking also. So, okay. So, you, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure this plays into it, not completely understanding, the whole process, but we in GovOps are looking at sports betting. There's fantasy betting, and we had the Attorney General's office in, and my understanding is they were supposed to have submitted rules regarding that years ago. We asked why, and basically their statement was in a sense, there hasn't been any problems, so we aren't moving forward with any rules at this time. I'm asking that in the sense of, I mean, if we were to have asked specifically by a certain date, you need to have these rules. I guess I have a little bit of a concern when it sounded reasonable that the reason that they didn't submit rules. So I wouldn't want to be too specific. And again, as Senator Bray had said, again, there could be an issue with, the ability for a particular agency to even do it, whether it's, staff or money-wise or whatever. But anyway, that's just some comments to throw out there, not necessarily a complete process, but.
Okay, and I think that's consistent with what we're talking about.
Yeah.
here, too. Okay, any other comments? Okay, then I think you have enough? This
I can
Okay.
start working on some guidance items and you can then
Okay.
tweak them and you can figure out what to do with them. And it could be that the approach is like what you did with the legislative intent memo. It goes to the chairs and it's also sent to Jen and we don't talk about it at the meeting.
Okay, any other business? Okay. We're adjourned at 8:40.